talk I'm doing for you is strategies for defeating distributed attacks, not distributed denial of service attacks especially, but just distributed attacks. Who I am, I go by the name Simple Nomad. I also go by the name Mark Lovelace. I have the nmrc.org website. NMRC is a kind of a made-up thing that was created kind of as a joke about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. There's actually a fairly large number of people that are involved in it. Originally it was going to be a combination of hackers, artists, and a number of other things. The whole art end of it hasn't taken off yet, which is kind of a sad thing, but that's another topic. I reported some security vulnerabilities to BindView over their Hacker Shield product, and lo and behold, a few months later, I was a senior security analyst for BindView's Razor team, which is kind of nice. BindView is, I like working there because they are not afraid to go ahead and hire hackers. That's kind of a cool thing. In this presentation, I just want to cover a few basics for you. I'm going to assume everyone knows what IP is and that you understand addressing, because I don't want to have to go through a whole bunch of wasted slides on something most of you probably know. And I hope that you understand some basic system administration. You don't necessarily need to know how to administer a server or a network down at the detail level, but just to have at least some kind of an idea what a system administrator kind of goes through day to day. And if you don't know who the system administrator is, it's usually the person cowering in the corner, holding a blanket up next to their chin, saying, "I see dumb people all the time." So, that's my only joke, and so now you all can leave. That's the only funny thing I had to say. As far as the tools, I do mention some in here. Most of the tools I'm mentioning have probably already been referred to with their URLs in other presentations, or you probably should know how to use a search engine to get to them. I think I do put in some stuff at the end of the printed presentation for you there. I'm assuming you understand basic usage on everything. A note on terminology. I did try to go through and clean this thing up. I changed all the references to attacker in here as opposed to hacker or white hat or gray hat or black hat or script kiddie or whatever that you want to call that stuff. I just refer to all that. I don't refer to all that stuff, okay? Just attacker, and we'll go with that. And if you need to make mental adjustments in your mind to think bad, evil person, then you can go ahead and do that with your own mental facilities, silently. And I'm going to be mainly taking kind of a network point of view. A lot of this stuff's going to be theory, or at least I thought it was going to be theory until I had a couple of side conversations earlier this morning. I was explaining what I was going to be talking about, and I've had a couple of people say, "Oh, I've been working on a tool just like that, just for fun. I didn't know what to do with it." And so some of this stuff is actually becoming more of a reality. I'll mention some host-based stuff, but I'm not going to dwell on it very much. Some of the concepts, these were originally developed as NMRC projects in 1999, and the stuff was first really addressed in public last October in SANS, and some of the concepts originally that come up with as far as distributed attacks and some of the models go started turning up in the distributed denial of service stuff, and I didn't even catch it myself until someone that saw the October thing said, "Hey, it looks like someone saw your presentation and started implementing things," and that was kind of odd, but it does happen. I want to talk a little bit first off about, I wanted to say one thing. There's in the presentation, in the printed presentation, there's I need to make sure that I point these out to you. There's the two money slides, okay? They're in your printed thing, and I'll let you know when we get to those. There's two of them. And they're the ones that actually we talk about some things that aren't common, and when we get to those, I'll point those out. And then there's a third slide that's not in your presentation, which I'll talk about at the very end, which has to do with some surprises and stuff that came up, because we have a lead time on these presentations when we turn them in so they can get printed. Anyway, attack recognition basics. Now, I'm going to forget about, if I'm using terms wrong. This is just for the basis of this presentation. Pattern recognition, okay? This can be when you're looking at an attack, you're looking for a byte sequence in RAM, perhaps. You're looking at the inside of a packet while it's moving across the network. Another example, seeing a number of connections that occur against a server within a set time frame. And for the most part, pattern recognition is considered real time. You see the thing, you see the event happen, and then you immediately report upon it. Effect recognition, this is to where you see the results of an attack usually, and such as you see your server's been restarted, you're getting high CPU and you don't know why. Another good clue is that you've got system binaries that have been altered, and all of a sudden you run tripwire or MD5 against stuff at night and say, oh, we had something happen overnight, that kind of thing. These are usually considered non-real time, which are the after effects of an attack. Now, the problem that you have when you're doing attack recognition is that you have the biggest one, I think, is blended pattern and effect attacks. And the blended ones, a lot of times, a good example is denial of service, where essentially the pattern is the effect. You're using up all the bandwidth. And if you're doing spoofing, then that all of a sudden creates something that's a little bit harder for you to have to deal with. I mean, sure, you can go ahead and block that, and then it can just reappear from another spot. So that's kind of a tough one to deal with. Sniffing attacks are extremely difficult to deal with because unless you have access to that box, or unless you've actually used anti-sniff and done some type of baseline timestamp against that, then it's going to be kind of hard to tell. Now, if you're trying to do that against equipment you don't own, it's even more difficult. So a sniffing attack that's occurring outside your networks and the perimeter is extremely hard to deal with there. The other thing that's a little bit of a difficulty to deal with is the decoys and the false identification of the true attack source. I probably should put the word true in there. I mean, you couple in there, you got things where you got decoys. You can have what I call throwaway hosts, where I've compromised, say, 5 or 10 hosts, and I don't care if you find out that I am attacking from that box. I'm just trying something. Maybe I want to try and attack twice from that box. If it works the first time, fine. If it doesn't work the second time, maybe you've got some kind of IDS that's now going ahead and blocking that behavior, and I don't care about that host, I'm going to throw it away. And if that box is some compromised system somewhere, you may go back and trace back and find that box only to find out that it's been completely owned and the true owners of this box are in question, if you know what I mean. The current solutions are usually one or the other. They're usually pattern or effect. You have there's no true real-time global solutions to speak of. There are a lot of vendors that are selling stuff that they say we cover everything, buy our stuff, and we cover every single item that you have, and you can get close with SNMP, but that's a whole other story right there. I mean, there's still really no global things. They're going to be able to take entries from firewall logs and router logs and your IDS and syslog and everything else and be able to correlate these random events that occurred on 5 different platforms and say, we just had an attack of some kind. There's really not anything that is like that. And the larger you scale these things up, the more problems that you have trying to get all these disparate systems trying to talk to each other, and therefore it's real easy to defeat them. Basically, some of the things I'd mentioned previously, such as, well, we'll get into that here, actually. The thwarting techniques, okay? Rule-based systems, I think, is pretty much common knowledge. If you can figure out what the rules are, then you can probably trick the device that has the rule in it, okay? And that's a real common thing to do. Log watchers, and this is something that is all people that run Swatch and stuff like that and sit there and scrape logs, or you're running reports that grab statistics out of logs and whatnot. You can throw these things off if you make your traffic look like what is supposed to be normal traffic. If you've compromised an upstream host and you're forging packets coming in on port 25 from a business partner, and it's actually a part of an attack, it's possible that because of the amount of mail that you have with that business partner, you're not even logging that stuff, you're not even looking at it, or if you do look at it, you don't notice it. And so that's the kind of thing where you can, those kinds of things can be deceived. And any time-based rules, that's fairly simple to go ahead and get around those. If you can figure out what the time-based rule is, then usually you can bypass it. If I need to stretch out the number of events from happening within 1 minute to 2 minutes and then nothing gets triggered, then there you go. Okay, this is what is needed, and it doesn't exist yet. The overall behavior network host monitoring tool. And so someone needs to write that. I want you to get out there and do it right now, because you'll make $1 million with it. Okay, trickle-down security. I decided that I would come up with some flashy term because, you know, Marcus this morning had his controversial thing, so I'm going to have mine, which is trickle-down security, and which is if you can come up with a solution for a distributed attack, in the process of doing so, you're going to learn a lot about your network, and you're going to learn a lot about how things all interoperate, and you're going to close a lot of holes inadvertently when you do that, okay? Off-the-shelf stuff is really not enough. You can get a lot out of your firewall, you can get a lot out of your IDS, and you need to do that stuff anyway, but it's just not enough. So the things that we need to do, we need to learn about the attack types, and we need to think about defensive techniques for those. Now we're going to start getting kind of into the meat of things here. The attack patterns that are starting to occur more, and this is basically why we kind of need to raise the bar. There's more large-scale attacks, and these come in a couple of flavors. You may have a large-scale attack where someone is just scanning a huge amount of hosts, a class, 2 or 3 class Bs. They're looking for vulnerable hosts, vulnerable to one particular item. That you scan several thousand machines, you're going to get a few hits, a few hundred, maybe even 1,000 if you're lucky, depending on what you're scanning for, particularly if it's a fairly new type thing you're looking for. So you have large-scale attacks like that. You also are having more of these, the distributed denial of service things, I think are just kind of the tip of the iceberg as far as that whole idea of spreading out your attack. I think we're going to have probably more of those as well. This is becoming a very bandwidth-rich world in which we live. All of a sudden, we've got fairly high-speed access coming right into our homes, and so we've got a lot of leverage there. The other thing is because the bar has been kind of raised as far as people wanting to make sure they use firewalls and IDS and whatnot, there's better enumeration and there's better assessment going on by the attacker of their target. And I think the presentation that preceded me is probably a good example of this, although that's probably pretty extreme. But there's a lot of bright people out there that are trying to raise that bar. They're trying to look at new ways to get into the system. There are 2 basic distributed attack models, okay? The first one is the attack that does not require direct observation of the results. And then there's the one that does require direct observation of the results. And I'll explain those as we go through these. Here's one right here. Basic model. We have this is commonly used in the distributed denial of service attacks. That's where you have the client out there, or there's a bunch of different terms that have been put out there about what they are, but when you have a client talking to a server or a series of zombies sitting out there on a number of compromised hosts on large bandwidth-rich pipes, and now they're all carrying out these things via an agent and going out there and attacking all these locations. So this is kind of the basic model that we've seen earlier this year. A more advanced model is we have I'm just using forged ICMP timestamp request as an example here. The attacker sends a forged ICMP timestamp request to the target. The reply comes back. The attacker sniffs the replies, and then from sniffing the replies can do host enumeration. That's a fairly simple idea there. Basically what we're doing now is we're saying, okay, I'm going to forge a packet in, and I'm going to get the results back, and the person that I'm sending the forge request into is not going to know that it's me. And this allows me to do I'm actually seeing the results. Okay, this is the first money slide, okay? This is the one, and you can look in your book, I broke it out into about 30 slides here so I can go step by step and explain it. This is the one where you have your target, and it's sitting behind a firewall, okay? First thing that I want to do is I want to compromise an upstream host. This host is probably at the ISP. It doesn't necessarily have to be. If you're, really super cool and neat and you've owned some large backbone provider, then you probably have ample access to this kind of thing. But nonetheless, you're at the ISP. It's close to the firewall as you can get. From this upstream host, you never, ever, ever send a packet towards that target, towards that firewall, ever. Okay? He doesn't do anything towards that device at all. And I'm going to install some special software on him. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I've got my attack nodes that are sitting out there, and I'm controlling them from some type of master node. Now the attack nodes, these I would consider them kind of expendable. Okay, these are your throwaway hosts that you've compromised. You compromise 15, 20 of these things, 100 of these things, whatever. And what you do is you're able to communicate from the master node to the attack node, and then have those from there go ahead and launch whatever it is they're going to launch. If they're going to launch attacks, let's say you want to do some type of probe, you want to do some type of a distributed Nmap thing, then you can go ahead and do that against that target. Now, the thing that you do there is you forge the replies, or you forge the source address, and then you're going to watch the replies. The replies are going to come back. Now, the source addresses that you're going to use, you're going to be looking at things like trusted business partners would be a good one. Anything that's going to be possible to have some maybe some extra rules in there in the firewall that's going to allow some stuff through. Then you're going to make this, and a couple of reasons for this. One, yeah, they may have the extra rules that are going to allow some types of packets through. The other one, excuse me. Okay. All right, where were we? Okay, we're getting the replies back. We may have rules that are going to go ahead and allow that kind of traffic through. There also may be some type of VPN stuff that we've got in place here. There's other elements of trust that may exist between that. Certainly, any kind of stuff coming from that trusted business partner or whatever, that's probably going to be ignored in logs. So you want to make sure that we use those IP addresses or whatever. Or you could make it, if you wanted to be malicious, you could make it the target's business enemy or whatever. But anyway, we sit there at the upstream host, and what we do is we sniff the replies as they come by. So, master node to the attack nodes send in their probes or the attacks, and then we sniff the replies. And then just for grins, we create a covert channel that works between the upstream host and the master node. This way you can get a full TCP handshake, and you're using all forged packets, and there's no indication from anyone exactly where the stuff is coming from. And to kind of make this even more insidious, the way I would be communicating with the master node, from the master node to the attack node, is when I'm sending my packets to one of the attack nodes, I'm not necessarily sending the packet directly to the attack node. Maybe I'm sending it to that same segment, and that attack node is sniffing. Or maybe I'm sending it to somewhere past that attack node. and then it's just sniffing and it's picking that up. There's all kinds of things you can do with that. You know, you send in, you know, an ICMP echo request with a certain kind of one-way key, and it says, okay, the very next packet, I'm going to go ahead and pick that up, and that's the one I'm going to look at the data in it. So you can create all kinds of fun stuff using that. And that's probably the way I'm going to communicate with my upstream host back to my master node, is I'm not going to send directly to the master node. I'm going to send somewhere in that direction to where he can pick it up sniffing. So you basically try to hide everything. That's what you're trying to do. Anyway, well, that's one of the money slides. We'll get to the other one, which actually talks about how to detect some of this kind of stuff. So we talked about the models a little bit. Some things I wanted to point out, I think these have probably been covered a little bit in some of the other sessions, but I wanted to go ahead and kind of touch on them again. ICMP, there's some fun things you can do with that. Of course, the sweeping the network with echo is one to tell if you've got hosts actually up. Alternatives to ping are, of course, timestamp, and some people do implement info request, although I don't think it's required or it's expired RFC-wise or whatever. But it's interesting too, because you can, some of the fun things you can do with it is Microsoft non-Win2K does not respond to a timestamp request. So it's possible if echo is open, for example, you could sweep a class C with echo and then sweep a class C with timestamp, and you can tell which of the devices are, you know, probably, you know, Windows 98, Windows 95 NT, that kind of thing. So that's kind of a interesting thing. Another thing that you can do with ICMP, some I've been kind of playing around with, and I haven't really quite got it yet, but it's you know, it's coming, and that is if I can send in a packet that I think is going to be allowed through the firewall, typically you know, host or port unreachable ICMP packets, and I can supply it with illegal values, or you know, maybe I'm going to send it in there with the fragment bit set, and it turns out that I don't send any other packets in with it, and it says I never received the rest of the fragmented request. It is possible then that I can go ahead and do a level of host enumeration to tell where my addresses are, because if things are written to spec, they should say, oh, I received an illegal ICMP packet, and I'm going to send back a request saying, hey, you just sent me something that was bad. ICMP is supposed to work that way, and that sometimes can work to your advantage if you're doing that kind of host enumeration. A tool that I wrote called ICMP. Hello? Oh, there we go. Sorry, lost the mic for a minute there. A tool I wrote called ICMP enum. This is an example I did on a live target where they were blocking echo, but they were blocking a timestamp. And these apparently are, I think they're probably Unix devices. I used to work at that company, so I roughly knew what was where. Another thing I know it's been mentioned before, and I'll kind of go through this fairly quick, but using Nmap to do your ping sweeps. The port scanning stuff, when you couple that with what you've learned with the ICMP, that's kind of a fun thing. Of course, the TCP fingerprinting that goes on. There's some things that are kind of included within Nmap that are kind of fun. As you know, it uses a libpcap. And that means that when you're doing certain types of scans, you're going into promiscuous mode, which means that if I'm on a class C, I can just simply do all decoys, and I don't give my real IP address, and I sit there and just sniff the replies back. I give it, you know, I basically tell it, okay, well, actually, my source address is, you know, a guy down the hall. He's on my same segment. Looks like he's the one doing all the scanning. I still get all the replies. So it's got some neat features in there like that. And I think because of that, it would probably be fairly easy to go ahead and extend it. Go ahead and extend it so that maybe it's just in a listen mode, and you put that on your upstream host or whatever. Other probes and stuff that can be done, looking for security devices. Typically what you're looking for is some type of IDS or some type of particularly inactive one where you try an attack and then it shuts off your IP address either for a short amount of time or for a long amount of time. And that's where the whole idea behind using the throwaway hosts come into play if you're doing it that way. If you're doing the full distributed attack from that one slide, you can certainly see how the results are working as you try these various attacks using different IP addresses. And of course, using some of the stuff that Loft had come up with the anti-sniff stuff. I mean, this obviously can be used against your site if someone is fairly clever and persistent with it. So that'd be another thing to try to detect promiscuous devices on your network. Network mapping is really important if you're using these type of distributed attacks. So it's really important to determine the network layout. Traceroute is a really good tool for doing some of this work because you need to know roughly what is sitting where. And of course, a firewalk is which I should have had in here, but I mean, is another good tool for doing that, particularly when you're trying to determine stuff right behind the firewall. This is an example, this network mapping example, just to show you the kind of things that you would do kind of before you set up one of these distributed attack models. This was against a live target, and from what I understand, according to the FBI guys in my home area of Dallas, scanning is not illegal. That's what they told me. You know, they don't. But so I actually did a presentation that involved some of these slides, and they wanted to know what the hell I was doing. But I did tell them. I said, nope, this, just scanning. Nothing like that at all. Against this target, after doing some initial probes, I noticed they had two ISPs. Both of these went to major backbone providers, but basically you had Cable and Wireless and Southwestern Bell were the two main ones. And then just through a variety of doing some of the probing and stuff I already talked about, it was fairly easy to start determining stuff like, where their VPN was and how the Cable and Wireless route was the main one going into the VPN. It was really hard to determine the VPN, being that the host name was VPN, so. And believe it or not, the host name for the firewall was Firewall, so that was a tough one. And then, of course, being able to, with various probes, being able to tell that they had, FTP and web sitting out there inside their DMZ, and it became apparent that they did do some type of load balancing because you get odd requests back. You get things that when you're doing your trace routes and stuff to various devices, doing repeated ones over time, you begin to realize that they're doing some type of load balancing. You kind of flood one end a little bit, try to drive up the traffic on one side. The easiest way was to pull down some copies of some wares that someone had loaded up to their FTP server that they probably didn't know about, and drive up that bandwidth, and then all of a sudden I'm coming into the what was the VPN link, which didn't make a lot of sense. But between those various probes, it was not too hard. It was not too hard to go ahead and determine exactly what kind of devices we had back behind there. And then using, of course, the Nmap fingerprinting, I was able to tell exactly what these devices were. I blanked out most of those IP addresses, and I actually changed a couple of what those were because, like I said, this is a former employer, and I don't want them coming after me saying, what the hell are you doing? But I was able to determine also that they did have an IDS, but I couldn't figure out which segment, whether they had two or one or whatever. This gives you an idea that, if I can build up this kind of model for my network mapping, then obviously I can do a whole lot more damage if I'm compromising Cable and Wireless and Southwestern Bell. And I know that those two companies obviously are extremely secure, and they cover every base, and there's no holes absolutely at all. And especially Southwestern Bell, they've always had top-notch security with everything they do. So I know that there's probably no problem there. But you get the idea. Compromise that upstream host. You have a network map like this. You can put together a fairly sophisticated attack plan to go in there and really do some serious whatever it is you do. Defensive techniques. Good security policy. I want to hammer on this in a little bit. I know people talk about you need to have a good security policy in place. The main thing that you need to have when you have a good, particularly the larger the company, you need to have a security policy in it with some meat in it. Okay, you need to have buy-in from upper management. Yeah, I came from working in the Fortune 500 10 years previous to working at Bindview. And I just saw time and time again, you have the lower people down there in the trenches that are out there just, they're just busting themselves trying to fix things, and they find these problems, but all of a sudden, as it starts going up the management chain, it becomes a political battle. Oh no, well, we can't separate out the FTP, anonymous FTP off of our mail server, because that would require another box, and it's not in our budget, and we got our budget cut. So we're not going to do that. So you're just going to have to live with that, and the hell with your policy. If you have upper management buy-in into that kind of thing, then maybe you've got something you can use to approach that. It's really hard to get management on your side with policy. The other big thing that I've run into, and this really, it plays into the whole politics thing that you find in large companies, is when you have these they have extremely rigid change control processes that are in place in a large company. They say, well, no, this is our production network. We're not going to just throw changes in. You need to go off and you need to test it. And everything you're saying, how do I test it? I need a live, T1 to test this thing. This isn't going to happen. I need some big pipe to test this thing. Are they going to pay for that? Probably not. And so what happens is that your process starts bogging down. You have these changes that you need to move out there. Maybe management is bought into it, but they're not going to allow you to bypass the change management process. So part of the security policy, you need to make sure that the change management part of it that may be going on in your companies are actually taken into consideration, especially for those systems that are attached to public networks, such as the internet. Split DNS. Make sure that all your public systems, that their host names that you're storing that in one DNS server, and you stick that out in your DMZ with all the other public boxes. Okay? You do not need to have just one DNS server or multiple DNS servers for your whole company that have not only the external but all your internal stuff. The particular company that I'd done the scan on, they did not split their DNS, and once again, this was a political decision that they had made. There's a big thing, we're not going to waste another box out there, and because our standard is to only put these huge boxes into the DMZ, and they were going to waste one on just this. And so you were able to, and they didn't block zone dumps, and so you're able to basically get a map of their entire internal network. So you need to make sure, this is very important, this takes care of a lot of problems, and I would say that you have the separate DNS just for the internal stuff, and that's what it uses, okay? It's just for that, not only. The other thing is drop and reject packets with a TTL of 1 or 0. That's fairly important, okay? Real common probe technique. My firewall at home, I've been actually getting hit with that a lot halfway lately, so. More defensive techniques, of course, minimal ports open. Granted, it only takes one port to send the attack through, but you've got the idea there. Just minimal ports open, okay? Stateful inspection firewalls, of course, the previous presentation may throw some monkey wrench into that whole firewall thing to begin with, but you still get the idea there. You really need to be doing something just besides looking at, am I just allowing this IP address in or not? It needs to say, is this actually a part of an existing conversation? If it's not, then I'm not going to let this packet through. That really needs to be stressed. Having here modified kernels, IDSs to look for fingerprint packets. A lot of the fingerprinting type stuff, it puts out a specific signature, both in map and case, so that's fairly easy to spot that pattern. So any type of IDS you have that you're able to put stuff in there, I'll go ahead and do that. The modified kernels, the easiest one is like Linux, where you can go in and you can say, okay, is this in if I got a packet coming in a connect state, towards it's a SYN packet, for example, all right? Fine, I'm going to go ahead and allow my normal firewalling or whatever, go ahead and handle that type of packet. But if I'm getting something and it's not a part of an existing connection, I just need to drop the packet, okay, or reject the packet or whatever. You just shouldn't, I don't know how many, I think pretty much everything is set up to where if it's got an open port and you hit it with a packet that's not the proper one that starts off a connection, it shouldn't have any business actually sending back any kind of a reply, or at least the reply should send back is no. I'm not going to give you any information. And for some reason, that is not the norm, and it should be. Even though I mentioned this, you really need to probably limit ICMP inbound to host and destination unreachable, source quench if applicable, or you think it's going to buy you something. But I would limit that as much as possible. I would also limit outbound ICMP. I mean, do you really need to have, in a large company, 50,000 users, do you really need to have every one of them to have the ability to ping Yahoo? Okay? For the most part, they put the address in their browser and it doesn't work, then they call you anyway. I mean, so what difference does it make? You know, go ahead and block this stuff. You know, allow it from only certain addresses, perhaps. Maybe the people that actually work on the network, for example. Let those people be able to do it. Maybe here's a to-do for someone out there, write some type of ICMP proxy, you know, that authenticates you so you can do that. I don't know. Something to try. DMZ server recommendations I have here. Of course, split services between servers. Some of the recent stuff that's come up, like with FTP, for example, that's been on a bug track lately. Just, you know, if you're running FTP on your mail server or on your web server, you're just asking for all kinds of fun to occur on your boxes if someone finds some kind of new attack. So you need to split these things out. Always use current patches is another one. And this is a really, really important thing. I can cite you example after example of a vendor silently rolling in security patches. A lot of times vendors are fixing things, they roll them in with a security patch, or they roll it in with a regular patch. They don't tell you that it's security related. They just say this is, you know, this is a fix, this fixes some issues that we've had, and boom, and it actually fixes, you know, maybe they did it accidentally, okay? Whatever, but for whatever reason, a lot of times security stuff gets rolled into there. All the major vendors have done that. So even though they don't say it specifically, you need to treat it as though it is a security patch. And in a lot of cases, if it affects availability and whatnot, and if availability is important, then it's almost considered a security patch in itself anyway. On these DMZ servers, I would certainly recommend using trusted paths. Hopefully you have operating systems in your DMZ that support such things as trusted paths. Any type of anti-buffer overflow settings, whether you're using some of the patches that are out there to open source kernels, or you're using some of the settings that may come from the vendor that turn some of that stuff off, go ahead and use that stuff. And there's other kernel patches out there that are available that may give you certain nice, neat little things to work with, such as state tables and whatnot. If there is any built-in firewalling software, I really recommend you go ahead and use it. It really comes in handy if, for example, if the FTP server has no business pulling files or copying files to the web server, then you need to firewall that, okay? Only allow the needed traffic into that web server, whether it's coming from internal, other places in the DMZ, or externally. Okay, very important to do that. I wouldn't put anything in the DMZ that didn't have this capability. I know that the whole idea behind the DMZ used to be, okay, well, if they break into the DMZ, then all they can compromise is just the devices in the DMZ. Well, that worked several years ago, but with the explosion of e-commerce now, a lot of people are putting their whole business out there in the DMZ. So you really, really need to start thinking about just the security between those boxes. Those are the boxes. If you have a large company and you can't harden, you know, your 50,000 internal users' machines, at least harden those ones that you've got out there that the general public can have access to. And of course, anything that uses state tables. Make use of that. That's very important. It takes care of all kinds of problems. All kinds of problems. Firewall rules, limiting inbound to only necessary services is always a good thing. Outbound via proxies, this is, I've been to a couple of places where we've actually seen this done and done fairly well, where they basically say, okay, the only thing that can go out FTP, Telnet, or via the web is going to go through a proxy. And that helps give you a focal point right there. You know that all the outbound Telnet, FTP, and web services are always going to come out through that proxy. So then you can have your IDS looking for outbound packets as well. All outbound traffic needs to be looked at, not just inbound. Most of this whole distributed denial of service stuff that went on at the beginning of the year. If there was a blockage of rogue and forged outbound packets, then a lot of that stuff wouldn't have worked. So we need to practice being good neighbors. Intrusion detection systems, a point on acquiring one, or several points on acquiring one. You need to only use an IDS that you can go in there and you can do custom stuff with it. Custom rules, nice little things. That way when the zero-day stuff comes out, then you can go ahead and put stuff in there to try to handle it. And this is surprising, saying that the IDS should be capable of handling fragmented packets. It was, I think, 2 years ago here at Black Hat that a lot of this defeating IDS stuff was originally brought up. And there are still IDS systems, commercial systems out there that do not address this. And some of the ones that are addressing it now have only started doing it within just the past few months. And so that's a really, really bad thing, because that's a really easy way to get around it. The other one is that the IDS should be capable of handling extremely high speeds. I mean, we're talking about, if it can handle 100 megabit and not fall down, then that's good. And you're saying, well, I don't have 100 megabit coming inbound. If you've got 100 megabit internally, then any internal stuff heading out that you might want to catch, you're going to possibly miss it, depending on where you put your IDS. Okay, spoofed packet defenses. This is the second money slide. Okay, the hardest thing is to say, okay, is this packet forged or is this packet not forged? And this is a technique that you can do. Basically, you get in your packet, it's your suspected spoofed packet. Is this a spoofed packet or not? I want to be able to figure this out. Okay, I look at the TTL. Okay, now I'm going to probe the source address that's in that packet, and I'm going to try to get what the real TTL is, and then I can compare the two. And if I get a mismatch, then I've got a possibly spoofed packet. Now there's some caveats with that. In particular, it's kind of hard to get a device running UDP to cough up a UDP packet for you if you don't have an open UDP port. Because the most common way to do this is with a half open, and go ahead and hit an open port on it and get the TTL. But so there's some caveats with that. But TCP and UDP, the time to live that it starts out with is typically 64. If there's some kind of problem where, like, maybe you sent a request to a closed packet, the TTL is going to be 255, so you're going to have to adjust for that. And then, of course, ICMP always starts out, I'm pretty sure it almost always starts out across vendors at 255. I've just started doing some research into this to try to measure and see on the various IP implementations if these numbers are consistent across the board, because this way you can actually try and check whether you're getting a spoof packet or not. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if you do it quick enough, you usually can get fairly accurate. I'd say you probably have at least a 90 to 95% chance of determining whether it's a spoof packet or not. Yes, routes do change. However, if you have set something up in your IDS where it says, okay, if I'm reporting this type of error and I'm going to kick off a script or something, kick off a script that's going to measure the TTL. And that way you could possibly get a fairly good indication as to whether it actually works or not. This is the part where we do the whole question thing, and I give you some stuff to look at. All the references, this is some of the reference material that I've got there. I think SANS took off my presentations. I referenced the SANS website there. I think they may have taken off those presentations. They did have them online for a while, but I do have some URLs there for you to look at. The surprise slide that I wanted to go over. Okay, this is the stuff that I wanted to go ahead and let everyone know about this. I hate doing a vendor plug at a non-vendor thing, but you know, you got all these diamond and platinum and whatever sponsors going on here. But the Hacker Shield, for those of you that do use the Hacker Shield at BindView, has the Rapid Fire Update 208, which is now out. It does the SANS Top 10 that they put out. It does all those checks in there to check for the SANS Top 10. And it includes an extremely comprehensive CGI scanner that us and the Razor team worked pretty hard to put together the database on that. And go to BindView's website for information on that. Okay, that's the commercial thing. Now the free stuff, okay? Free things that you can download. Vlad the Scanner, okay? And this is freeware, it's open source. It was written by all the members of the Razor team. They all contributed various pieces of code, so it's half in Perl, half in C. It's a goofy hybrid thing there. All it does is check the top 10 security list. And even though it's freeware, to make it worth your money, we made sure that the CGI stuff that's in there is the same CGI checks that the Hacker Shield thing does. And so that's a pretty cool thing. And it also includes, because one of the things on the SANS top 10 list was default users and passwords, or known users and passwords, or extremely simple or weak passwords. And so there's a kind of a protocol scanner that's built into Vlad, which does, it does Telnet, FTP, SSH, SMB, our login. I know there's like 6 or 7 of them that it does. I can't remember them off the top of my head. We just put it out yesterday. So it's like you got your 1 day. It's not 0 day. It was 0 day yesterday. It's 1 day. And then the other freebie piece of software that I just finished up yesterday morning was DSpoof, which does that time to live thing. So you can, and it's a command line that works on Unix. So what you can do is, hopefully, if you've got something that's sitting there scraping logs like Swatch or something, or maybe your IDS or firewall will go ahead and run a command line thing. If it hits a certain event, you can go ahead and run DSpoof. And DSpoof, interestingly enough, actually does IP spoofing. So you can tailor your packet to attempt to match up the type of thing that it came in. That way, if you need to get through a state table somewhere to try to determine what a TTL is, then you've got a way to do that. I'm going to be improving the DSpoof thing as we go along. There also, I think BindView is also, you need to hit the booth they have out there, because they're giving away some, I think it's evaluation, 30-day evaluation licenses for Hacker Shield. That way, if you want to go ahead and be able to run that thing, they can go ahead and get you set up with that. That's pretty much what I have. Do we have, let's see how much time we got. Oh, we finished up in plenty of time. If there's any questions that anyone has, if you just yell or raise your hand, and I'll try to repeat the question. Yeah, right there. Okay, talking about doing the upstream sniffing, that a lot of ISPs are moving to switched environments. You would use something similar to a dsniff, which goes through there, and you can start doing ARP table manipulation, and that would probably take care of that. Once again, a fairly thorough mapping of the ISP, you'd probably be able to determine what it is you need to be shoving in there, so you can even actually try to limit it or whatever, so you don't like over ARP or whatever and make yourself known. But that would be how I would do that, to kind of to get around that. Yeah, right there. I think I know where you're going with that, talking about blocking the TTLs of 1 or 0. If you've got something at your firewall, or at that spot that's doing some type of proxy or doing NAT or something like that, and someone correct me if I'm wrong in this, you should be getting a fresh new set of TTLs and stuff like that that are going in. And also, for the most part, I mean, the TTLs are set up pretty high to begin with, and if Mike Schiffman was around, he'd probably talk to it more in detail. But because particularly I was thinking, the firewalk tool which is that he wrote, is one of the reasons why you want to block that at that level. But no, it really hasn't. I really haven't run into any problems doing it. I've done it at several places and really haven't had any problems whatsoever. The only thing I ended up blocking was those types of probes. Another question, yes. Okay, yeah. Basically, what his comment there was, as far as the despoofing thing, as far as the TTLs go, if you're coming in through one spot, and then your packets are going out through another link, which is actually fairly typical, or it may take another link because of load balancing or traffic type stuff. No, there's really not a lot you can do in that, and your TTLs are going to be off. Odds are, and so the thing is though, is you could put in a degree of a fudge factor in there. I mean, I sat and hammered, just from home, I sit and hammered the NMRC.org website with a script just to measure the TTL. And it would change by 1 or 2 on occasion. And that was just because it was taking a different route from where I was running the script. Where it would take a slightly different route, but for the most part, it would be usually within 1 or 2. And I would imagine that for the most part, in those load-balanced environments, you're usually not going to have much more than a discrepancy of 1 or 2 hops to begin with. So if you sent a TTL query there and it came back and the difference was something like 20, okay, then you probably most definitely has some type of spoofed packet. And yes, it is possible, and I put this in the README that comes with dspoof, that there's some ways that it's not 100% foolproof, not by any means. More comment about the, if you're using multiple, this is a pretty valid point, you're using multiple backbone providers, and let's say, some of your, we start talking about the difference between, second tier and third tier, and what kind of redundancy that they have, yeah, you do have that. The thing that I've found so far, and this is extremely unscientific, is that sometimes you'll find that a particular router or a particular device will kind of get the hots for a single path. It may not last forever, but a lot of times what will happen is it'll take it, it depends on how fast your response is if you're triggering this thing from an IDS. It will have a tendency to get really excited about a certain path, and that path may only work for just a short amount of time, but usually that's, maybe we're talking the difference between seconds and milliseconds here, but that may be enough time right there to be able to make that determination. Many other questions? I see we're losing people rapidly here, so I want to thank you all for attending. Go ahead and go hit up the BindView people for whatever free stuff you can, and don't forget the free wares you can get from the Razor website. Lots of fun tools from the guys. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later.